Hi, good afternoon. Today we are going to start with the defined phase of the Six Sigma. As you know that it's a DMAC methodology which works on the overall improvement cycle wherein D stand for define, M stand for measure, A stand for analyze, I stand for improve and C stand for control. However, all these methodologies together constitutes a successful project which is called a DMAC project. However, we are going to start with define today. I'll talk about define and we'll talk about certain topics which would be very, very helpful for you. So let's make a start. Okay. Before we start, I would like to tell you that define phase of Six Sigma is essentially a sales pitch, which we put together to get the stakeholder buy-in. We anticipate all the questions which the other person might ask and try answer those questions. So basically, in the define phase of Six Sigma, we prepared a problem statement in detail to ensure that the stakeholder, the person who is going to get impacted, would be able to understand why it is called sales pitch, because it's a kind of a proposal that we're going to submit to take the stakeholder buy-in. That's why it's called a sales pitch. We will talk about in detail that what are the components of define phase, what all do we cover in define phase. But just for now, it's called a sales pitch, which is put together to get the stakeholder buy-in. And in the define phase, we not only prepare a sales pitch, we as a team anticipate all the questions that the person might ask, which we are going to talk about now. In the define phase of Six Sigma, the focus is on identifying the customers and the project CTQs, which is called critical to quality. We develop the project charter, so we'll understand what is a project charter, and we will also be developing a process map. Okay, so let's get into the detail. Okay, before we get into the project charter, it is very, very important for us to understand the different types of customer that we have. Okay, so we have different types of customer. We have internal customer, we have external customer, and we have regulatory customer. Let's understand these customers one by one in detail. Who are our internal customers? Internal customers are the ones who are utilizing, using a product or service as an input to their delivered output for the next internal customer or the external customer. Internal customer can be a co-worker, people from another department. So for example, you're part of operations, people from finance, people from marketing, sales, HR, etc., etc. So all of the people which are in different departments are the internal customer for each other, because we all are working for an external customer to satisfy his need. So therefore, different departments are there within the organizations who deal with different kind of company, different type of processes, different types of customer. So that's why they are called internal customer. However, they are also utilizing the product and service to fulfill the requirement of the external customer. Okay, so they are working together to ensure that the requirement for the external customer is met. So we'll talk about who is an external customer. Any customer, any consumer who is using the end product or service is called external customer. So for example, when we buy any product, when we buy any service, when we walk up to any restaurant, when we order any product using Amazon, when we buy any subscription like uh, Amazon Prime membership, Netflix membership, we all are the external customer because we are the end customer. We are not going to give that service or sell it to somebody else. So external customers are the end product or users, and it is very, very important for you to understand external customer have choice. And if they don't like your product or service, they can go anywhere. So it is very, very important to satisfy the need of the external customer, because they are the ones who is 100% dependent on the business impact, on the profitability of the organization. Okay, now let's talk about regulatory. Regulatory companies are the ones who regulates the different organization to ensure that everybody works on the same tangent. Okay, so we have different regulations, like we have regulations like TRAI for telecom. We have uh, different regulations for insurance industries, with different regulations for Indian government, for any US or any UK government also. And why they are customer? Because they also have certain requirements. Okay, if their requirements are not fulfilled, we as a organization or we as a company will not be able to meet the customer requirement. So that's why regulatory is also one of the important type of customer who we should always keep into consideration while delivering any product or service, because anything which is not meeting the regulatory requirement would lead to a failed product or a defective product. Okay, moving on. Now we would like to understand what is CTQ. Okay, and I'm sure everybody's aware, but just for the benefit, I would like to tell you that CTQ stands for critical to quality. What is critical to quality? Critical to quality are the measurable characteristic of a product or process. The specification limit must be met in order to satisfy the customer. So every customer has certain requirements, certain specification limits, which he always wants in any product or any services to ensure that we meet the customer requirement. And therefore, we as an organization should always keep in mind that we meet the customer requirements. And that's why the key word here is the specification limits. Okay, specification limit is a key word here, because if we do not meet the customer specification limit, we will not be able to meet the customer requirement. Okay, so let's take an example. If my customer says that I want the XYZ services to be delivered within 3 days, so 3 days is the specification limit. Okay, if any customer says I want uh, the tea, for example, if you walk into a restaurant, the tea that is which is going to serve me should be boiled at 80 degree. Okay, so that is a specification. Okay, if the customer says I want the services to be 100% quality, that's a specification limit. So without the specification limit, we will not be able to define that this is a critical to quality. So for example, if a customer says I want a good service, that's not a CTQ, because customer has not defined it. It doesn't define it at what is the definition of good for him. Okay, so that's why very important. If the customer has not said it, it is our responsibility to ask that what is the specification limit, which has to be measurable in order to meet the customer requirement. Okay, so we have understood critical to quality. Now we'll understand customer CTQ. Customer CTQs are customer need and expectation. Okay, so now we'll get into the different ways to collect VOC. So we are in the defined phase of Six Sigma, and there are different ways to collect VOC. We will talk about one. So there are surveys. You can see that through surveys, through interviews, you can be a customer, because when you are a consumer, you can always give your feedback. And nowadays, there are a lot of mediums which are being used to capture the customer survey also. Okay, how the surveys can help to collect VOCs, the customer observation, interviews, there are some audits happening, and be a customer, there are listening posts. Okay, so you can see it's there. For survey, there are complaints. For interviews, there's a comparative comparison, how the other companies are doing, and be a customer, there's a focus group also. One very important thing which you should know is that all these are medium to capture the customer requirement at what my customer is looking for. Therefore, this has to be captured and scrutinized properly, because this is something which exactly what your customer is saying. And this gives us a good platform to work on our product or service. This gives us an indication. Customer also give us an indication that what are the good things that we are doing. Okay, and if the customer is already liking those goods, product and services, we as an organization, we as a process should continue to sustain it. If there's anything which customer is not familiar with, or which is not being as per his requirement or specification, we as an organization or as a process should find out a way to ensure that those things are not being catered to the customer which is not interested in. We should make an action plan. We should do a thorough research investigation to come up with something so that we would be able to meet the customer requirement. So whenever we are collecting the VOC, it is very, very important for us to look at all these ways. So we as an organization, we as a process can use any of these methods to understand what the company is looking for. Okay. I hope this is clear to all of you. Okay. Now we're going to define what is VoB and VoE. Okay. We've been talking about VOC, which is voice of customer, what my customer is talking about, what my end customer is talking about. Okay. Absolutely. That is the first foremost requirement. And as I told you, without the customer requirements, we will not be able to produce a successful product and service, because customer being the center of the heart, it is very, very important to listen to the customer very, very carefully. On the other hand, now I will talk about two of the concept, which is called VoB and VoE. VoB stand for voice of business and VoE stand for voice of employee. Let's see how these two terms help us to deliver the customer requirement. What is voice of business? What are the need and expectation of the people who run the business itself? Example, shareholders, officers, and others involved in corporate governance and strategy development. Okay, so these are the people who are sitting at the top, the MD of the organization, the CEO, the CFO, the COO, all these people who are at the executive level. They have certain requirements to ensure that the business sustains. They do a lot of market research. They talk to different leaders, and they also identify that these are the things that needs to be worked. Okay, mostly their expectation is towards two critical things, which is to improve the profitability of the organization, and second is to optimize the cost. So all these process improvement opportunities, all the Six Sigma projects, which is identified from voice of business, which is also called as VoB, is towards improving the profitability of the organization and reducing or optimizing the cost. Okay, it is very, very important for us to ensure that our voice of business is equal to our voice of customer, because then it will make a successful business case for us to commence a project. So in a nutshell, if the same thing is being taken care by the customer, which means the customer requirement, and same requirement is for the business, that would make a successful business case. Now we'll talk about what is voice of employee. What is voice of employee? The need and expectation of the people executing the strategy and delivering the customer are critical as they are on the front. In our organization, there are employee satisfaction surveys being conducted. Why they are being conducted? It is very, very important to understand what my employee is saying. If I don't consider what my employee is saying, if I don't look at, I would not be able to produce good services or products, because people are the most important part of any organization. If people are not motivated, if people are not satisfied, we will not be able to deliver any services. No matter how wonderful technology you have, how wonderful processes you have, how great market share you have, how great capital you have, but if your employees are not being captured, if your employees are not being taken care, we will not be able to do it. So therefore, voice of employee is very, very important. And in every organization, it is a responsibility of an HR team to ensure that the voice of employee surveys are being conducted. Post that, uh, the most critical things, the most vital things are being captured, and basis that the next year strategy is being developed so that the people are being satisfied and happy at the end of the year or at the end of the day. So that's what is called voice of employee. So we have understood voice of business, and we have also understood voice of employee. Now we are getting into the defined phase. As you remember, in the beginning, I told about the defined phase is a sales pitch, which we put together to get the stakeholder buy-in. Okay. So now in the defined phase, we prepare a project chart. Okay. Which is a document which is used to get the stakeholder buy-in to do a project. So we will get into the components of the define phase, and let's understand that one by one. So we are getting into the project charter now. As I earlier said, it's a document that provides framework and objective, clarifies that what is expected out of the project. So there are a lot of things that which is expected out of the project, which we will get into the detail. But this is just an outline which we should know that it's a document that provides framework and objective, which clarifies that what is expected out of the project. There are some activities which are performed under project charter. Okay, so these are very important thing. Under project charter, the first thing that we need to look at is the business plan. Second is the problem statement. Problem statement is also known as the opportunity statement. So we can either call it as a problem statement, or we can either call it as an opportunity statement.